The Middle East, an enormous amount of anger still, a great deal of sorrow, ripples across the region and into the wider world about the explosion at the al-Ahli hospital in Gaza City yesterday. The Gazan Health Ministry earlier today saying 471 people were killed. The Arab world and much of the rest of the world adamant that Israel is responsible. Israel and its Western allies saying that they accept Israel's explanation that this was a misfired rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Joe Biden was asked at the news conference he gave after his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu and others why he was so certain that it was done by, as he put it, the other side. And he said, because of what has been shared with me by our intelligence operatives. Joe Biden not able to meet with Arab leaders because of the anger over that hospital blast. He said on the Gazan hospital blast, he was outraged and saddened at the enormous loss of life. The evidence, he said, points to an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza, denied by Hamas, denied by Islamic Jihad, rejected by many, many people around the world. On aid, he said he'd asked the Israeli cabinet to agree to the delivery of what he called life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza, based on the understanding that it would go to civilians, not Hamas, and that Israel had agreed that aid could begin to move from Egypt to Gaza. Israel has confirmed that and said that until all of the hostages have been released, aid will not move from Israeli crossing points into Gaza. Joe Biden said $100 million of new U.S. funding will be made available for humanitarian assistance to both Gaza and the West Bank. There was also the promise of an imminent and what he called unprecedented defense package for Israel, which he said he would ask Congress for later this week. Good luck with that. Congress not able to elect a speaker at the moment, and it doesn't look like it's going to be able to do that for a while. We're joined now via Zoom from that part of the world by Haggai Matar, who is with Plus 972 magazine, which is an independent online non-profit magazine run by a group of Palestinian and Israeli journalists. Haggai, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
What do you make of the accusations and counter-accusations, the various explanations given for the cause of the blast at the al-Ahli hospital in Gaza City yesterday?
The explosion is a complete tragedy, and the death toll there is still not official, but looks very, very grim. I must say, I have not yet been convinced entirely by either side's claims. There are very serious claims from both sides, and I think until we get some sort of very serious forensic analysis of shrapnel and of angles of the hit, it'll be very hard to make a definite call.
And I suspect, as something I said earlier, because my listeners, most of them are adamant in their opinions that it's absolutely no question Israel to blame, or other listeners saying absolutely no question the Israeli explanation is credible, it must be believed it was Islamic Jihad. And I suspect that if there is a clear, unequivocal truth, we will never know it, because whatever is put on the table is going to be disbelieved.
Well, depending by whom, there are people who would choose not to believe any sort of evidence under any circumstance. I think, we here have a long history of both sides spreading lies about what they did or did not do. The Israeli army back in 2 years ago lied about killing the Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, sent out videos trying to disprove its involvement. And several years later, and a lot of forensic work of excellent journalists and investigators, they had to admit, and I think now it's commonly accepted by everyone, that it was Israeli soldiers that killed Shireen Abu Akleh. Maybe some people will choose to disbelieve actual facts, but I do think there is such a thing as facts, and I hope that most people will be willing to accept them.
It does though seem, with the refusal by Arab leaders, including the Palestinian leader from the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas, to meet with Joe Biden in the wake of their citizens' anger, perhaps their own anger as well, at what happened at the hospital, that Biden has had a one-sided trip. He's arrived intending and hoping to speak to Israeli and Arab leaders. He ends up speaking only to Israeli leaders, and the level of mistrust, the level of anger, the level of desire for revenge seems from a distance to be at such a height that it really seems impossible to foresee any substantive moves towards a truce, a ceasefire, significant humanitarian aid, the rebuilding of the very beginnings of a peace process. How do you see the next couple of days, perhaps next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's way beyond the question of the hospital specifically. The distrust has to do with so many other elements, and I think the U.S. has rightly won the distrust of Arab leaders and specifically of Palestinians because it is uh, systematically siding with Israel exclusively, justifying basically all Israeli actions and putting almost no limitations on what Israel can do to Palestinians, and does not show any kind of concern with Palestinian lives the way that it does with Israeli lives. So, and that definitely contributes to the ongoing violence. I don't think we'll be seeing a truce or anything like that in the coming days. I hope that in the coming weeks, I mean, we do have politicians saying that this is a war that's going to take weeks, if not months. I really hope that that's not the case, and that within 1 or 2 weeks, the international public opinion will start to change, and there will be more pressure, and that is what is needed. We need pressure on Israel to go into a ceasefire, and from there, gradually, after releasing the captives in Gaza, after deals to release Palestinian prisoners, gradually rebuild trust and start negotiations and end apartheid in this land, because otherwise we'll just be eternally trapped in these cycles of violence.
The humanitarian situation, whatever your views on who is responsible, who initiated the violence, whether it was caused by Israel's ongoing treatment of Palestinians, displacing Palestinians, putting in settler communities, and so on. Whatever your views on that, I think everybody must recognize that the humanitarian situation in Gaza at the moment is beyond horrific. And I suppose it's great that Israel has now said that humanitarian supplies can move in through the Egyptian crossing. The Egyptians, it seems, don't want freedom of movement across that border crossing. They don't want to have to deal with 80,000, 100,000, 150,000, 250,000 fleeing Palestinians from the horrors of the Gaza Strip. So, what's your sense of the degree to which the humanitarian crisis might start to lessen over the next few days?
I think that is perhaps the one thing to be slightly more optimistic about. I think of everything that Joe Biden said in recent days, that is the one kind of caveat where he was like, well, Israel needs to stop this entire siege that prevents Palestinians from getting drinking water. So reopening water pipes. Israel is committed at least to the south of the Gaza Strip. There is talk about opening up different avenues for humanitarian aid. I think that preventing a large-scale humanitarian catastrophe, in the sense of hundreds, thousands more people dying of hunger or of lack of water, that is something that I do believe that Joe Biden will prevent. And the details of whether it will come through Egypt or it'll come through Israel are not as important, because I do think that that will be solved. It's true that Egypt is not willing to accept, it's a one-way opening of the crossings. If there will be, so stuff will go in through the border with Egypt, but they won't allow refugees to come out.
Haggai Matar, thanks very much for talking to us with Plus 972 magazine, which was started in 2010 by a group of longtime Israeli and Palestinian journalists after the 2008-2009 Gaza war. They felt that the English language conversation on Israel-Palestine wasn't accurately reflecting the reality on the ground, so with their own money, they built their own platform.